let's go into the Israel-Hamas conflict. We talked about this a little bit yesterday. The Israeli government floated a thought bubble, what they call a concept paper, about what to do with these displaced civilians of Gaza, because rooting out the terrorists in that little strip of land is going to be difficult, could be long, will cause devastation to what little infrastructure they have there, considering that all the aid dollars that flow to the Hamas government from Western countries, including Canada, usually go to terrorism. It doesn't go to electricity, running water. I believe the UN builds the majority of the schools there. It doesn't go to healthcare by and large. It goes to weapons caches and paying terrorist families if your terrorist son dies while killing or abducting an Israeli. So they don't have a lot of infrastructure there to begin with. There will not be very much left. So what do you do with the civilians? And Israel floated an idea that perhaps some or many of them could come to Canada, and given Canada's out of control immigration targets, seems like a good fit for Justin Trudeau, because he would surely welcome them. Anyway, the immigration minister said that this is a potential for Canada. They're not opposed to it. This is obviously going to drive up the cost of living in Canada. They got 2.3, I think, million potential refugees from Gaza. I have my own thoughts on this. I say if we're going to spend money on providing aid to refugees, let's do our best to keep them in the region. Let's not give the money to the United Nations, who won't give it to UNRWA, which is an organization linked to money laundering to terrorists. It's the UN refugee organization specifically for Palestinians who are like third and fourth generation refugees. That's not how that works, by the way. Now you're just a resident. I would prefer if we gave it to Egypt and Gaza, or Egypt and Jordan, to King Abdullah II. He's very Western minded. The majority of Palestinians are Jordanian anyway. They're a cultural fit, they're a religious fit, they're an ethnic fit. There will be no barriers to integration for them. So if we are going to give money, and knowing Justin Trudeau, he's going to give a lot of it, I would rather put it in directly in the hands of the governments best suited to absorb these refugees by keeping them in the region, as opposed to plunking them in Canada, where they are going to experience extreme culture shock. The nature of the refugee crisis will mean that many of them will be unvetted, which is a public safety threat to Canadians. And they're just going to do better closer to home. But anyways, let's roll this video now that you have my thoughts on how to solve the world's refugee crisis.
Thanks. And just on another note, Israel's Ministry of Intelligence presented their government with a concept paper that suggested Palestinians could be moved out of Gaza, and that Canada itself could accept them as refugees. What do you say to that idea?
Hard to speculate on it. We are open to those fleeing war. This is a war. At the same time, it's something that it's very difficult for me to speculate publicly on. I haven't read the report, would have to read it. But again, the focus, as I mentioned to your colleague, is to get a humanitarian corridor open to welcome Canadians and their families out of Gaza. It is still very much a pressing concern, and one that remains unfulfilled yet.
Yeah, I've seen some really funny clips of Immigration Minister Marc Miller, but that's a huge concern, the fact that there are still Canadians stuck in the Strip. Canada was obviously extremely slow to act on any of that assistance to get out of the country. I think the US was sending military planes in there as early as the Monday, maybe even late that Sunday. Sadly, October 8th was my birthday. I think that they were already taking action and getting that ball rolling. And meanwhile, Canada just kind of sat idly by and hoped for the best, I guess, sending their thoughts and prayers. But the thing too, when we welcome refugees, and I think a lot of Ukrainians have probably been in this exact same position. When you come to Canada, there's also that cost of living crisis, and so this isn't like the wealthy, prosperous nation that Canada once was very well known for. You come to this country for freedom and wealth, and that is so far from the truth these days under the regime of the Justin Trudeau Liberals. That I think that if we were to welcome any refugees, whether or not that ends up coming to fruition, which I think that Sheila, you make some much more realistic proposals there, they're going to struggle and they're going to say, you know, I can't find a job. I can't find anywhere to live. The weather's terrible. And why were we even sent here to be better off? We may have been better off staying where we were from. At least there you have a sense of community, you know, the area, you know, you have your family. Yeah, the fact that we're welcoming people into Canada when Canada's a mess just seems like even more of a recipe for disaster. Not only for, as you mentioned, the people seeking refuge, but for Canadians who we're at our limit. We really can't take on anymore. There's not resources or a plan or an infrastructure ready and able to accommodate this kind of influx. But yet we're still seeing it. And I don't know if Minister Marc Miller is prepared to put the brakes on any of this. I had a clip from him, I think about 4 weeks ago, where he said they've been processing 5 million data points a year, and data points obviously refers to people. So that is a massive number for a country that started, you know, in and around 36 million a couple of years ago to be seeing coming into the country every year, and that's just legally. There's a whole host of others who come in as refugees or cross those borders illegally, and we have no idea where they end up.
You know, just more over to your point about the Ukrainian refugees, I think this bolsters my point about the Palestinian refugees. So yes, Canada did take in Ukrainian refugees, but if you're going on issues of cultural compatibility, it makes perfect sense for them to come here. They have a community here. Canada, outside of Ukraine and parts of Russia, we have the single largest population of people of Ukrainian descent, and primarily out here on the prairies. Tomorrow, even tonight, I think, depending on when mass time is, I can attend church in Ukrainian. And I do from time to time at St. Sophia's. My kids can take Ukrainian as a second language here because we have so many people of Ukrainian descent. It culturally makes sense for our children to learn Ukrainian as opposed to French. You know, if you have so many Ukrainians here. So there's a church community here. There's an ethnic community here. Plenty of Ukrainian food here, like Ukrainian restaurants everywhere. I mean, do they even have phone books anymore? But if you look in the phone book, you'll find more Ukrainian names than almost anything else here. So for Western Canada to have taken in so many Ukrainian refugees makes perfect sense. They had religious communities that helped sponsor them and charities to help them. It's not like that with the Palestinians. They will be more successful, culturally speaking, closer to home.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. And we have another clip here to share. And I'm just trying to watch the time where Judy Trin, she's a correspondent for CTV News, posted this clip of Trudeau where she says this is the strongest language that she has heard yet from Prime Minister Trudeau on Gaza.
We, of course, continue to unequivocally condemn Hamas's abhorrent terrorism, and Israel has the right to defend itself. But the price of justice cannot be the continued suffering of all Palestinian civilians. We are deeply concerned by the catastrophic impact on the population in Gaza, particularly on children, which is why we are calling for humanitarian aid and water and fuel to flow into Gaza We're calling on humanitarian pauses to allow that to happen. We're calling on the liberation of hostages, on aid to flow in, and on Canadians and their families to get out of Gaza through the Rafah crossing. We are hearing positive things. We are hearing positive news around movement at the Rafah crossing, and we are trying to encourage and make sure that more people, that indeed all foreign nationals, are
Do you know why?
I got a question. If I'm to believe the left that Gaza is some sort of open air prison, if it is, Hamas made it that way because it wasn't that way when Israel pulled out. But if it is some sort of open air prison, what the heck are Canadians even doing there? Mm-hmm. Why were they there? I have no idea why Canadians were even in Gaza whatsoever. I like how hostages were just a passing thing thrown out. 200 plus civilians still being held hostage by Hamas butchers, and Justin Trudeau throws it out like a throwaway line that Israel doesn't have a right to go get those people. If children and civilians are suffering in Gaza, Hamas did it. They just started a war with Israel apropos of nothing, are still holding Israeli hostages. And by the way, Israel has for weeks now been broadcasting into Gaza, sending text messages to the phones of civilians, telling them to head south because they were starting an incursion to the north. Hamas told them to stay put. Hamas is the organization putting weapons caches under schools and churches and mosques and hospitals. They do that on purpose because they use their people as human shields. If there are civilian casualties, they hang squarely around the neck of Hamas leadership like a millstone. And by the way, where are the conversations with Egypt, Justin Trudeau? You're demanding Israel not liberate its hostages the way it needs to. Where are the conversations with Egypt to get them to open up that border to take in civilian refugees to the south? There's a reason Egypt doesn't want to do that. There's a reason Egypt built their border wall meters under the ground to make sure nobody gets across. It's not anti-Muslim sentiment from the Israelis. I'm reliably informed that Egypt is a Muslim country now. However, it did used to be Christian. And they don't want a mass influx of Palestinian refugees for the same reason I suggest Canada should consider not taking in a mass influx of Palestinian refugees.
Hey, I got to tell you, I'm going on a cruise with a whole bunch of rebels. We're sailing out of Fort Lauderdale on March 23rd, 2024. That's not so far away, less than 6 months away. A gorgeous trip around the Caribbean. Holland America line, boy is that luxurious. And we're gonna bring some of our favorite rebel talent. Sheila Gunn Reid, David Menzies, and can you believe it? We're actually bringing Tamara Leach with us, and you are invited. That's rebelnewscruise.com.